Hey everyone, Tom here, and I am the creator of rambleon.rocks, and that's just a website for people who love travel and RV travel in particular. And this is the presentation for those of you who are maybe intrigued by the idea of an RV and want to know more. So this is a very broad spectrum kind of introduction to what's it all about, what's great, what's not so great. It's about an hour long, so saddle up and enjoy. So first of all, hitting the road. It is an American iconic fantasy. I think all of us at one time or another in our lives are going to either want to put a job behind us or a relationship behind us or a tragedy we've suffered. We just want to step out, and walk down those railroad tracks into new horizons. And maybe we're going to drive or ride a motorcycle. Either way, we're looking to open ourselves up to the vast beauty of the continent and just kind of clear our heads and our minds. So it's a very romantic notion that's been celebrated in song and story. And if you do it with an RV, you're kind of adding another element of independence to it, really, because now you've got this. You've got your home on your back, and nobody gets to tell you where to go or what to do. And it just really, I think, even enhances that that lustful desire we have for the open road. You can combine that with ideas of getting back to nature and maybe a more primitive experience. Let's be honest. The world just keeps getting more and more complicated and more and more modern. And I think all of us, from the time of Thoreau, we've realized that it's incredibly therapeutic to return to the rhythms of nature and to sleep under the stars and just have a little quiet, a little break from all the screens, and maybe spend some of that time with friends and family around a campfire. So all of that gets rolled up and wrapped up into why people might fantasize about an RV and what it might represent to them. And that's in our heart, but also you may be saying to yourself, but what about what's in my head, which are things like this? Are there going to be bears? Are there going to be bathrooms that are not like the one I have at home and I still have to use them? Will there be high gas prices? Will my RV get stuck in the mud or in the ocean, as in this case? Or will the sewer pipe explode in my face when I'm at the RV dump station? These are all reasonable questions, and if you've never had an RV or camped in one, you may be wondering. So that's what this presentation is designed to do. Is to try to address all of that, of how real is that fantasy and how real are those concerns, and should you let any of those get in your way. So again, Ramble On, www.rambleon.rocks. My wife Lori and I, we've traveled a lot in our 22-foot Airstream over the years, and we've got a certain amount of advice and things to say on all these subjects. So that's why we put this video together. And we started out years ago tent camping. This is actually us in Africa, where we spent 4 months in that little tent. But we've camped throughout our lives, and it was only in the last about 8 years that we finally got the RV. And it certainly adds a whole other dimension of challenge, but also comfort to your camping and adventuring. So again, this is a 101 type thing. We're going to talk about those dreams versus the reality. We're going to talk about what the difference between camping and RV living or full timing is. Talk a little bit about life on the road, and then we'll get into how to choose your RV. So dreams versus reality. So how real is this dream? We've got the fantasy. Can you actually experience that dream? And the answer is, it depends. So what about seeing the country? Are you going to be able to do that? Absolutely. That is real. What about that solitude that maybe you're craving, that reconnecting with nature? It definitely is real, but it depends on where you go. You may find yourselves in some campgrounds that are more crowded than your apartment block. That isn't all bad, but if you really want that kind of solitude that's sort of represented in that picture on the lower left or lower right there, it is obtainable. You just have to seek it out. And s'mores every night. I don't know if that was part of the dream, but once you spend enough time in your RV, you may have to modify back to a regular diet. Simplifying, is that real? Absolutely. You will definitely have a simpler life on the road than perhaps wherever you live in your day-to-day. How about spontaneity? Definitely possible. It's possible to live and travel in an RV and never know where you'll be that night if you wish. But it will come with some compromises that we will try to address a bit later. Serendipity, well, you just have who knows what's going to happen today experiences. You will. That's something that you definitely, I think, will experience at a far higher rate than your day-to-day life at home. What about these concerns, the bears in the bathrooms? Like, will there be showers? There will. First of all, depending on the RV you buy, you probably have one right on board. And furthermore, many, many campgrounds that you visit will have perfectly clean and reasonable bathhouses. Sometimes our friends who are not familiar with RVs, they sort of imagine the camping being the kind they did when they were, Boy Scouts or something. And they'll say, oh, I bet you're looking forward to a shower when you get to our house. And we'll say, oh, actually, we just had one this morning, but thanks so much. Will I have to poop outside? No, you will not, unless that's something you're particularly into. Bears. Nope. Yes, if you go to certain parks, certainly they have grizzly bears in Yellowstone and Glacier National Park, but if you want to avoid bears, it's certainly possible, and it's not going to be part of your daily routine in most places you visit. What about the strangers and the weirdos? This is an interesting concern that people have. We hear it all the time. Put it this way, there's not going to be any more unsavory characters than where you live now. Probably less, because you're in a campground and somewhere beautiful, and those folks don't have a lot of reason to be there. Mostly you're going to meet people like yourselves. So don't feel like just because it's out there that it's somehow full of more concerning individuals. What about bad days? You'll have a few, but not that many. We've traveled over 500 nights in our RV, and boy, seems like we could count the bad days on one hand. What about things like laundry? Yep, if you are going to travel, again, if this is not just a one-week camping trip, you're going to have chores to do. You'll have to clean your RV, you'll have to do laundry, but these things take so much less time when you're traveling because your life is simpler. There's just less to do. It takes us 15 minutes to clean our entire RV, not the 2 hours it takes to clean our house. And this is probably the question we get, or the comment we get the most. If I was to do this, what you guys do, I would kill my fill-in-the-blank spouse or partner. It may cross your mind occasionally, but no, you'll be fine. In fact, it will probably bring you closer together. So I mentioned earlier camping versus living. If you own an RV already, or if you want to buy one, you may just want it for camping. You may want to just go for long weekends or weeks here and there. And that is very different from actually turning your RV into a home. So I wanted to address those differences. Camping is more of a vacation. You're going to go, you're going to have fun. And RV living, it has elements of camping. It has, you're certainly having a great adventure, but you also have to live your regular life. So instead of s'mores and hot dogs, you're going to have whatever your regular diet is. You may learn to do it a different way on a grill, for example. So instead of campfires and guitars every single night, if you're on the road for month after month, it might be Netflix after dinner. So again, imagine your regular life, only now you're doing it in an RV. And similarly, you may be okay or even happy about limited connectivity to the outside world on a short camping trip. With RV living, you're going to need the internet to do both things that are fun, but also you'll need it to make your next camping reservation down the road or to pay your bills. All the things that we need to do in modern life require the internet now, and you'll need it out there on the road. So that is a big change. And while you can allow yourself and schedule nonstop fun when you're camping, you do have these sort of life responsibility things you have to do when you're living. Being with family and friends, you're obviously, you might plan a camping trip with a group of friends, whereas when you're RV traveling, more often than not, you're going to be just you and your significant other, or maybe just you. But in this case, you're going to be meeting and greeting a lot of new friends, which is actually a wonderful part of it. A few more, you're obviously with camping, your range is sort of around where you live, and with RV living, it's pretty much unlimited. Budgeting, you're going to maybe spend somewhat indiscriminately because you're on vacation. You'll get back to your budget and your diet when you get home. And with RV living, you need to have sustainable spending. But, excuse me, one thing that's interesting, though, is that you can even save money. You can actually move into your RV, have this great adventure, a whole host of things that are very much like a vacation, and yet you can actually spend less money than if you stayed home, which is really cool and something we'll address a little bit more as we go along. With RV camping, you'll probably bring everything kind of because you can and because you might need it, might use it, all the fun toys and tools. With RV living, you'll definitely want to distill it down to the essentials and near essentials, because you realize A, it adds weight, but B, it just adds a lot of stuff you got to keep moving around all the time. And you'll put up with temporary discomforts like sleeping near or on the ground, or bathrooms that you don't love with a camping trip, because you're like, hey, it's part of the fun, I'll be home next week. With RV living, again, you're making this adjustment to living in what amounts to being a fairly tiny house. Depends on your RV, but ours is a tiny house. So is it for you? Well, do you enjoy road trips now? Or is your kind of idea more, I want to get to the destination? I don't like the plane trip or the car ride or whatever. You should probably enjoy the road if you're going to live out of an RV for a period of time. And you need to love the outdoors because you live outdoors. A lot of people imagine, oh, well, now I have to live in this house, this tiny house. You don't. We live outside. We cook outside. We pursue our hobbies outside. And it's only in the worst weather that we might be, stuck inside, as it were. And you only have to like camping, because frankly, RVs can be pretty luxurious. So you don't have to love the dirt and the sleep on the ground part, because you don't deal with as much of that. Does the idea of simplifying appeal to you? Then this life would appeal to you. Are you willing to learn to fix things? Little stuff goes wrong. Big stuff goes wrong too, but little stuff goes wrong more often. And you have to sort of have a willingness to pull up the YouTube video and sort it out. It's never life or death. It's typically not going to ruin your experience. But if you don't like or learn to tolerate that part, it may become a frustrating way of life, because these things rattle down the road, even well-built ones like our Airstream, and things break, either just due to age or wear and tear. And are you and your partner team players? This is pretty important. Probably you wouldn't be with them if you weren't, but you do need to work together a lot. It's close quarters, either in your tow vehicle or in your RV or wherever you are. You're making a lot of decisions, so you need to have a good functioning teamwork relationship there. And then you need to think about, where are the important people in your life. If you can't imagine going a day without seeing, your son or daughter who lives in the same town as you, then this will be a challenging experience. And we've certainly seen people where that becomes their biggest challenge. So this is our son, our youngest son, visiting us in Utah. So you can kind of have them come join you on the road a little bit here and there for their vacation. That's a nice way to deal with it. But on the flip side is that if you have friends or family that live in other parts of the country, it's actually an easier way to visit them, because you might have, let's say they're old friends and you like them a lot, but you're not going to take a vacation to go see them. But imagine if you're living on the road and you're traveling all around the U.S., you can stop in and see them. And that's a much more natural way to visit them. You can live in your own space. You don't have to use their guest room. So we've actually found that we've reconnected with all sorts of people that we wouldn't have otherwise seen for years and years. So a bit of a pro and a con on that last one about RV living. And I should mention RV snowbirding. This is sort of a hybrid between the two. Basically, it's like having your summer home, or I should say your winter home. People who are getting out of the north and going south for the winter, sometimes they do it by renting a villa, condo, owning one of those things, etc. But you can do it in an RV, and lots of people do. And it's kind of a cool way to do it, because if you love where you go, then great, you can do it again next year. But if you don't like your next door neighbors, or you didn't like the climate in Florida or whatever, you can just switch it up when you have an RV. So there's actually a real advantage. Now your domicile isn't going to appreciate in value the way a condo in Florida might, but you also don't have property taxes or hurricane insurance and those sorts of things. All right, so what's life on the road like? Well, as I mentioned, you definitely want to be friends, and there's a lot of together time. Not just again crammed into your small space, but because for us, we generally just sleep in our RV. We don't spend a huge amount of non-sleep time in there. But you're together, whether in your tow truck or going for a hike or going grocery shopping. So you got to get along. Teamwork is required, and the planning really never stops. So it's just something to, if you're not sure about this one, you can go out there and test out the relationship, but it will definitely tell you pretty quickly if this is for you. You're going to do a lot of exploring. There's just so much to see with national parks, monuments, the state parks. We love state parks. They're just amazing places to camp, and usually almost on par with a lot of national parks in terms of beauty. There's beaches, there's mountains, there's prairies, and then connecting all of these things is our roads, and not just the famous ones maybe you've read about or heard about, but also just roads you've never heard of, and they happen to connect two places and can be kind of experiences unto themselves. So we just love all of that exploring. So where are you going to camp? And this is a subject that I may do a whole separate video on, because there's so much to talk about here. And this is only an overview, but you may, if you've never really camped in an RV, you may not realize how many options there are and how they vary from one another. And it's hard to even categorize them, because there are so many different situations, so many different types of campgrounds, and even within a category like national parks, they can vary tremendously. So I, again, will do my best to sort of give you the 30,000 foot overview. The first big distinction is private versus public. Now, private is, as it suggests, these are privately owned. They can be a chain like Campgrounds of America or KOA, and there are lots of different chains at all different kind of price levels and sort of orientations. They might be really family oriented like KOA with swimming pools and swing sets, or they might be really retiree oriented with lots of pickleball courts and hot tubs or something. Then there are tremendous, tens of thousands of mom and pop private campgrounds out there. And they tend to, they're everything you can imagine, but they tend to be more like the picture in the top right, where they're going to jam you in because that's their business model. They're trying to take a piece of land and generate as much revenue as they can out of it. But they're not as, you might think, well, that's not what I want from my campground experience, but you'd be amazed at how popular they are because everybody is generally happy and they create these little micro communities and people love them. So there's lots to do and lots of neighbors to meet. So it's actually a very popular and surprisingly enjoyable way to camp. But if you're seeking a little more solitude, there's Hip Camp, which is sort of the Airbnb of camping because it's private landowners who will let you put their RV in their field or their pasture or their woodlot, and it might just be you. Many of them offer a few spots. Some of them are just solo, and you pay them whatever they ask for a night to be on their land. And then there's Harvest Hosts, which is a subscription service, and they have a whole host of different members. Basically, it started with wineries, but it's extended to farms and to breweries and to golf courses and all manner of things, even churches. And basically, you can park there for free, and then what the host will hope and expect is that you patronize them in some way. You might buy some bread and jam from the farm store. You might go to the brewery and have dinner, or buy a bottle of wine from the winery. And that's a really good model. I think it's about, depending on the deal you get, about $80 to $100 a year. We use that quite a bit. And then on the public side, this is all government or municipal. There's national parks, there's national forest campgrounds, there's Bureau of Land Management, which aren't usually campgrounds per se, but just land that you can drive onto and camp. There's state parks, which we again love for their combination of beauty and facilities. County parks, city parks. And the photos you see are sort of a smattering of these things. The upper right is a private campground. The one below that is also a private campground, but a little more spacious, a little less packed in. Lower right is a state park in Utah where we had, basically an entire cul-de-sac to ourselves, but you also have, hookups, which we'll talk about in the next slide. The lower left is a Harvest Host farm where, a horse may come up and greet you. Above that is a national forest campground, absolutely beautiful, very private, but few facilities. And then a state park on the top left in Colorado. Much like in Utah, there's hookups for your RV, really nice bathrooms, etc. So you can kind of get everything, and they all have different prices. And we actually just use a complete mix of all these things. And it works really well for us because we love the different advantages that each bring. So I mentioned hookups. I don't know if I've used the term boondocking yet, but this basically means, as it sounds, you're out in the boondocks, you don't have hookups. So whether you do a national park, which typically will not offer hookups, or you do a hip camp site on someone's land, or you're just staying at a Walmart for the night, you're boondocking because you don't have electricity, water, or sewer. Now that's okay because RVs are designed to do that. They're designed to be independent and freestanding. You have battery, you might have solar, you're going to have a water tank with fresh water in it. You'll have a gray water tank where your sink and shower water go, a holding tank, and you'll have a black water holding tank, which is where your toilet flushes. And you can make that last for, we usually average about 3 to 4 days, but have comfortably done 9. And some people go 2 weeks like that. It's all about resource management and your style and how much luxury you want. So after we've done 3 or 4 nights of boondocking and we get back to a full hookup where we can charge our batteries, refill our freshwater tank, empty our holding tanks, and we look at each other and we say, we love full hookups. But chances are you're going to be in a more packed in type of situation. That's usually the trade-off. But boondocking can be $0 a night at, Bureau of Land Management land, Walmart, a friend's house, you name it. Lots of free camping options out there. Or it can be very inexpensive. Some of our most beautiful campgrounds are national forest. Might be as cheap as $12 a night. And you're not going to have a hookup, but it's just incredible. And then national parks, you typically don't have hookups because they're very old and they don't have those facilities. Some do, but most don't. And that might be as much as $55 a night at the most popular parks. And that's, again, just because demand has skyrocketed for national park camping. On the other side, hookups. This is what you'll get in many state parks, which is part of the reason we like them. State parks are sort of a great combination between private and national park because they're beautiful. Campsites generally are more spaced out, but you'll often have hookups. So it's a wonderful mix, and they're typically pretty affordable. Maybe around that $50 range, 50 to 70. So what is a hookup? Hookups just mean, as it sounds, you can have a two-way, which is water and electricity. You'll see there the little electric thing that goes into your RV, powers your TV, your refrigerator, your air conditioner. And the water tap there goes in, and it's just like being at home. Your sink and your shower will run as long as you want them to. And then if you have a three-way, you also have sewer, which means that you can flush your toilet and drain your sink and shower into, their sewer connection. Sometimes when you have a two-way, you have to be careful because you've got unlimited water, but your holding tanks are limited, so you can't just indiscriminately flush and shower and do dishes because you've got to empty those tanks somewhere. And many two-way connections mean you've got to drive to that campground's dump station. So in those cases, you've sort of got a mix of you've got unlimited on the one hand, but you don't on the other. And again, these private campgrounds and places, state parks with hookups, probably going to run you $50 and up. So how do you fill your days? That is entirely up to you, but we've never been bored. There's so much to do out there. Every place you go is just a new place to explore and experience. And then many of you, like I do, will work from the road. Whether you're making travel videos or doing what I do for my day job, you'll need a place to work and an internet connection, and that's something we'll talk about in a few slides. But even without that, it is not hard to fill your days. It is just so much fun, and there's so many wonderful things that you can do all day long, even if it's just to read a book in your beautiful campsite. What about toys? People definitely, seems to be a real RV thing to bring your toys. So you'll see everything from, motorcycles and bicycles and kayaks and paddle boards and all-terrain vehicles. You'll see it all out there. Our only word of caution here is simply think about it before you bring it, because you do have to deal with it. Even if you've got some really great rack or something like all these people have, you're adding weight, of course, which costs money. But you're also just typically having to move stuff a lot or cleaning it if you drove in the rain and everything got muddy. They just tend to require a lot of handling and care. And if you're only, let's say you bring your bikes thinking, oh, it'll be fun to have bikes, but you only ride them once every 2 weeks or something, probably not worth it. What we do is rent in those situations. If we go to Moab, Utah, and I want to rent a mountain bike, I just rent a mountain bike. And all the money I've saved by not carrying the bikes or dealing with the bikes makes that an easy decision. Similar with kayaks. If you love waterfront campgrounds, rivers, lakes, and every day you want to get out in your boat, great, then you should bring it. But if you sort of think, we own them, why don't we bring them because we might use them, chances are you're better off renting, which almost every place you go like that, there is an opportunity to do just that. So that's our kind of advice with toys. Just be mindful about the cost benefit. What about health and safety? We get a lot of questions about this. And I think, in general, the things that people worry most about, but they probably shouldn't, Are bears bad people, and should they bring a gun? My advice is don't worry about those three things. You're going to have good experience. You're going to meet good people. You're not going to run into bears if you don't leave steaks laying on your camp, on your picnic table, and you don't need a gun. If you like guns and you want to bring a gun, fine, but I don't think you need one. And things that maybe they don't think about but are more likely to be areas of concern, drivers, like you have to really be cautious about driving, especially when you're in an RV. So don't drive tired. Don't drive too many hours a day. Insects are probably going to be a much bigger thorn in your side than bears. Don't get sunburned, and know whether your health insurance network covers you out there on the road and not just where you live now. I would say that if I had to guess, there are more RVs with pets out there than without. I mean, with dogs than without. And there's a surprising number of cats out there. You don't see them as much because they're not always running around outside the way the dogs are, but there's a lot of cats too. We have a cat. We would probably bring her on our trips, but she's a senior cat and feel like it's past the point where that would be a comfortable transition for her. But lots of people we know do bring them. And if we had a younger cat, I think we would too. So just know that they're a lot of fun. Dogs in particular love traveling. They will have a ball. It will add a bit to your camping fees here and there, and it'll limit your mobility a bit because, just to pick an example, certain national parks, because they're wilderness, you can't bring your dog. So then the dog has to stay in the RV if you want to do that hike and so on. But most people are fine dealing with those restrictions for the companionship. Obviously, you can't just open the door and let them out wherever you are, but if you have all that in hand already, then you'll probably find it pretty comfortable. We would recommend, though, that you choose your RV with your pets in mind, because that is, they take up more space than you realize just because of, their dogs. So you will need the internet. This isn't a camping trip. If you're gonna camp a lot, or if you're gonna live out of your RV for any length of time, even if it's 2 weeks, unfortunately, the internet just has become a necessity. Your cell phone, depending on where you go, your cell phone will cover you to a point, but it's certainly not the way they imply on those maps they show on TV, where the whole country is basically blanketed. I would say more often than not, especially when we're traveling in the western states, we have 1-2 bars. And I have a rule of thumb that the prettier your campground, the less likely you are to have, either Wi-Fi or a cell signal. Some people address this with cell phone boosters, which is a piece of equipment you can buy that will kind of extend the range. Those can be helpful. Not cheap. They're about $600, but they do work to a point. And other people address it by buying 2 different cell phone plans. So they'll have Verizon and AT&T, and if one is 0 or 1 bar, the other one might have 2 or 3. And that is a smart way to go if you can afford that. There are a lot of solutions to all this. One of the places that I recommend people go to get a lot more information on all this area, or in this area, is rvmobileinternet.com at the bottom there. I have just added Starlink to our equipment. We did several years just with our cell phone and got through it, but it was a challenge at times, particularly with my job. I've added Starlink. I'm hopeful that investment, because it is an investment, will pay off. And if you don't know what Starlink is, you can look it up, but it's Elon Musk's low Earth orbit satellite network that you just put a little dish outside your RV, hope that you don't have trees nearby, and you've got the internet. But there are definitely, it's not only expensive, but there are a lot of compromises and restrictions and things that the jury is still out for me. But some people have had good luck with that, and I'm going to give it a try this year. So what kind of budget do you need? Any budget is possible. That's sort of the bottom line here, and including you can live far more inexpensively on the road than you do at home and have a ball doing it. So you don't need to spend a lot of money to do this. Your biggest budget item is typically going to be gas. So the less you move, the more willing you are to stay 2 weeks or 3 weeks in one spot, the cheaper it will be. Campgrounds can be all over the map. On the right are two beautiful campgrounds. One is a national forest campground without hookups, $11 a night. And the one below is near Key West. It's a private campground, and during the high season, which is in the winter, you can pay $225 a night for those waterfront sites. So clearly your budget is going to be dramatically different depending on where you camp. Many people camp for free night after night after night, and everything comes with a trade-off. We do a bit of everything. We're going to be staying in New Orleans again coming up here, and I think it's $135 a night for a private campground. On the other hand, it's right in New Orleans. We can walk to the French Quarter. So that's pretty cool. After we stay, 4 or 5 nights in that campground, though, we'll probably do some free camping just to try to balance it all out. And then we rent our house out to try to bring in a roughly equivalent amount of money for our camping fees. So we sort of net zero there. And then we just manage the rest of our expenses like groceries and gas as close to what we would do at home as we can. And we can sort of make that sustainable. But as I say, you can even go way cheaper than that and actually save money by being on the road. It's a very exciting prospect. And then you can also work from the road. Sometimes that means bartering your time to get free camping. So you can be a camp host in private or public campgrounds, and just simply for a few hours a week checking people in or answering questions, you get a free campsite. And sometimes those come with full hookups in places that don't have hookups otherwise, so that can be pretty cool. We know a lot of people that have done that. You can go to websites like workcamper.com to learn more about that. You can also work remotely. I do not have a cool office like the one in the photo here, but people who work really long hours from the road often will upgrade their RV just for that purpose. And you can run all sorts of businesses out there, or just do your day job if working remotely is an option. So how do you choose your RV? Big subject, and I'm just going to give it the once over. But this was where we started, was in my little Mazda truck back when we first met. We camped across the country in that, living out of the back. But we were a little younger and a little more nimble then. So when we first started talking about getting an RV, my wife Lori wanted to get something like a VW camper van, probably hearkening back to her hippie days. And I said, no, I think we've moved beyond that at this point. We need something a little bit bigger. But obviously there's lots of people traveling around in pretty small vans out there, so you just have to know yourself and know your style. But let's hit them from the top down, or start with motor coaches. So this is where you're driving your own. The RV has its own, vehicle in it rather than towing something. And the Class A is typically the largest motorhomes. They're 26 feet to 45 feet, and they're as luxurious as your budget will allow. You can spend over $1 million in these, which is how rock stars travel from gig to gig typically. They have slide outs to create more space. Some of the cons, besides the expense, are that you will probably end up towing another car behind you, which is what almost everybody does now, because you don't really want to drive that to the grocery store or have to break camp just to go on a hike or wherever you want to go. So they're kind of like you end up towing something anyway, which defeats a little bit of the purpose of having self-contained. And then it's like driving a bus. So if you're comfortable driving the school bus, you'll be perfectly fine in this, and I think you get used to it. But it's a very big, rigid vehicle, and you have to know your pivot points. If you are going to bring a tow vehicle, by the way, I suggest you do it the way these people did and just slide your Porsche into the belly of the beast. That looks like a good way to go. So Class B, this is actually the smallest type of motorhome. They're typically built on van chassis or like a Mercedes Sprinter. Dodge has a bunch of these too. And these are very trendy. They're amazing the way they've sort of expanded the space, put in a bath and a shower, and put an enormous amount of storage into a tiny space. And so they're nimbler to drive than a trailer or Class A. You're certainly going to get the best gas mileage in the motorhome class. Caution would be, though, that there's not as much space as you think. They look great when you walk into one the first time. You're like, wow, they've managed to get everything in here. You've got your kitchen and your bed and your bathroom, but it's tiny. And after a while, too many days on the road, you start to feel that. And like all motor homes, you have to break camp to go anywhere. And in this case, you're not going to tow a vehicle behind this. So you really do have to pack everything up and put everything away, the dishes or the coffee cups or whatever you've got out inside your vehicle now has to be put away so you can drive to the store to get ice or whatever the small errand might be, or to go to the hiking trailhead. So that's a disadvantage to these that I think you have to you should be aware of before you elect this. And then a Class C, kind of in between the two, size-wise. So it's larger than a Class B, smaller than a Class A, and it's roomy enough for several people or dogs. I think the Class Bs can be a bit small for dogs. Lots of people bring their dogs with these, but I think they start to realize that dogs are going to take up a little more space than they thought. These are a bit bigger. They're built on truck chassis, obviously, and so it's just like driving a pickup truck. But as with all of these, you do have to break camp to go anywhere, and you can't really tow a vehicle behind them. So we get into the trailers. A teardrop is tiny and cute and adorable, but this is probably, in my mind, more of a camping thing and not an RV living thing, unless you're solo. Lots of solo people seem to make these work, but on the plus side, they can kind of go anywhere. You can tow it with anything. They're inexpensive to own, to buy, to tow. So a lot of pluses, but maybe not a solution that many people who are more than a single person are going to go for very long in. Oftentimes there's no shower or toilet, so you have to rely on outside facilities for that. And as I say, they're very dog friendly, but they're not necessarily dog owner friendly, because your dog will take up the entire bed in there. Standard trailers. This is maybe the most, the biggest class in terms of the different options. There's just so many different brands and configurations here. And they're probably the least expensive to buy of all the classes. They come in a wide range of prices, but there are very inexpensive options there. And your tow vehicle, whatever that might be, a truck or a car, is your camp car, so you don't need one. You already have one, which is nice. It's nice to be able to drop the trailer, set up camp, all the stuff you see in the photo there, and then be like, oh, let's get in the truck and just go down to the beach. And no problem. So tremendous range of shapes, sizes, styles. They're simpler and easier to maintain than motorhome. They don't have all the vehicle stuff as part of them. And the lighter weight improves miles per gallon. In terms of cons, you're a little longer and less nimble than maybe the smaller class of motorhomes. So you have to learn how to back up, and that takes some getting used to. Some of the brands on the lower end of the price scale are a bit flimsy. So buyer beware there. And there's a lot less storage space than the Class A's or the fifth wheels. And the fifth wheels are next. It's just a different type of trailer. It's a much larger trailer. They distribute the weight by putting the front of the trailer right into the bed of your truck instead of being on your bumper. And that gives them a lot more height, a lot more storage space. They're typically a lot more expensive and luxurious. They're easier to tow and back up. But there's less room in the back of the truck, which is not a huge deal since you have all this other space, but a factor if you like having that space. And they're heavier and require a bigger tow vehicle. So to me, these are very similar to Class A motorhomes. They just use a tow vehicle, but they're expensive, they're luxurious, and come with the same kind of set of compromises there. Should you rent before you buy? That's really up to you and how on the fence about this you are. It's not going to be cheap to do it, but if it's going to save you from buying and then having to resell an RV, it's certainly worth it. But there are standard rental options, sort of the Hertz and Avis type approach with Cruise America and some other companies. You can also do peer-to-peer, so more like an Airbnb model with RV Share or Outdoorsy. And you can even do this where they deliver it to you wherever you are in a campground or national park or something. Or you can do stationary options where you might get in your car, drive to the RV that's already been set up somewhere, just so you can experience living in an RV. You don't have to worry about towing it anywhere. You don't have to do all that. So it might be a good way to dip your toe in the water, as it were. And that is it. If you have any questions, you can email them to me at rambleonguy@gmail.com, or just go into the comments of the video. Thank you, and I hope you have learned a lot and have some things to think about. And we'll see you down the road.